Hello and welcome to the Controller Chronicles HD. In this installment, I'm reviewing the Hori Gem Pad for the PlayStation 3, although Hori also makes a version for the Xbox 360. So the first thing, why buy this thing, right? Because the PlayStation 3 controller, the standard DualShock 3, is a very functional, very good controller. Well, the main reason is right here. This right here. This D-pad far exceeds the D-pad of a standard DualShock 3 controller, which is this D-pad right here. Now, if you're playing a game that uses a good D-pad, or needs a good D-pad, this controller is really, really much better. And that's because this D-pad is not broken up in the same way that the Sony D-pad is on the standard DualShock controllers. Now, it's not a terrible D-pad, but having a proper functional D-pad made by Hori, who really know what they're doing when it comes to controller design, is advantageous. And this controller is not really all that expensive. So why is this D-pad so much better? Well, first of all, it's more comfortable to use, and it's also a little bit bigger. Even though the actual controller itself is a little bit smaller than the standard DualShock 3. Not by much. These controllers, are pretty much the same size. It's just some things about it, like the buttons are a little bit smaller and the analog sticks, are closer together and things like that. Back to the D-pad. The other thing you'll notice is when you turn the controller to the side, how it slopes in the center here. This is so you can rest your thumb comfortably in the middle, so you can make any movement you want, whether it be up, down, left, right, or any circular motion or whatever. This makes it ideal for fighting games, platformers, side-scrolling or vertical shooters, or classic games. Basically anything that uses a D-pad or needs a good D-pad. However, there is one major criticism I have to say about this controller, and that's its analog sticks. When you first buy this controller, it actually comes with these analog sticks. Now, I actually removed them and replaced them with analog sticks from an old Xbox controller, and the reason I did that was because these things really suck. And I don't know if you can tell from just the video, but this is just one piece of solid, hard plastic. There is no rubberization on the ends of the tips here, which means that when you're using the analog sticks, it's really rough on your thumbs. It's just like the old N64 Trident controller. If you remember that, the N64 controller had a big solid plastic analog stick. If you use that for any length of time, it would really start to hurt your thumb, and eventually, if you use it too much, it would rub your flesh right off, and you get a big blister, and just that's a really avoidable. How when all they have to do is just put a piece of rubberized thing on it. Alternatively, rather than replace the analog sticks entirely, take the controller apart and replace the analog sticks with standard Xbox analog sticks, is what I did here. These are from Controller S controller for the original Xbox. Rather than do that, you can also go on eBay and simply buy two of these little circular, silicone nub things, where they simply fit over top of the analog stick nub, like that, and then you can use them this way. But I sort of don't really prefer this design. I mean, it's all right, I guess, but I find it far better to just use, analog sticks that were, just the way that's meant to be, just the way they are. So I replaced the analog sticks, so that's not a problem anymore. But when you first buy this thing, don't expect to be using the analog sticks or want to use the analog sticks, because they really suck unless you do something about that. As well, the controller itself has this nice gradient look on it, and that's because it has LEDs that are placed throughout the entire controller. It's called the GemPad because it has this sort of like gem-like little faceplate here, and the LEDs will bright up. And so this is the blue one, or this is, I don't know what they call it, it's the sapphire, I guess. But they make them in pretty much every color. And they make a red one, they make a white one, and make a silver one, etc. So you can get them in whatever color. I just like the blue color, so why not? Let's get this one. The face buttons are very functional. These are actually very nice buttons, and that's typical of Hori to have good quality buttons on the controller. The start and select button are they're somewhat difficult to get to because you have the analog sticks right there. You have to lift your thumbs up and put them in the middle. But fortunately, you don't have to use the start and select buttons too often. It also has a turbo button, and that simply works by you hold down the turbo button, you press the button that you want turbo, and then anytime you press the button or hold the button, it's now turbo. So yay for that. But most PlayStation 3 games don't actually benefit from turbo fire at all, so it's just sort of like an afterthought than something that's actually necessary. Up top, the shoulder buttons are very nice. They're very functional, but there's one thing I should mention about them is that they are actually analog button or digital buttons and not analog buttons. So you can't simply half press the button and you feel like it's either fully pressed or not pressed at all. So this is not very ideal for a lot of different PlayStation 3 games, like first-person shooters, for instance, or driving games. It will only work for games that that really need and accept analog input or digital input and not analog input. As well, the controller does not have any 6-axis motion control stuff, so no gyroscope or anything like that, so you can't shake the controller and expect it to work with motion control games. So keep that in mind as well. And there's also no rumble packs in the controller, so no shaking of the controller, and they have the LEDs instead. It's also wired, but I don't see that as a problem because I prefer wired controllers over wireless controllers because no batteries ever worry about running out or things like that. And you don't have to worry about it running out of cord because in a very unusual move for Hori, which is a Japanese controller company maker, the cord is absurdly long. You have about 9 feet of cable to the USB connection here. Why it's so long is sort of baffling to me because, most Japanese controllers only have about 3 feet of cord. So it's usually way too short. This one's actually too long, but whatever. If you don't need the extra cord, you can just, bundle it up and, you just use the length that you do need. Now, it's, as mentioned before, it's standard USB, which means that it will run with PC, Mac, and even the Ouya. So if you don't like the standard Ouya controller and want to use the Ouya with your emulators or whatever, this actually works very well with the various emulators. You just need to set up the button mappings and the way that you want it to be. But otherwise, this is a great alternative to the standard Ouya controller. But I'm not going to be testing it with the Ouya. I'm going to be showing off some gameplay with the PlayStation 3. So I'm going to plug in the controller. I have my PS3 on. You might have been able to hear the little buzz of the PS3 in the background. Let's see here. Just give me one sec. Alright, there we go. So when the controller is plugged in, it now will light up. So I'm just going to kill the light here. You'll see, ooh, very shiny, powerful, bright LEDs. And it's got a sort of translucent design to it, which makes it very cool and very fun to look at. If you want, you can actually disable the light, or if you want, you can have it so that the lights will only turn on when you actually press a button. So here I'm pressing buttons and things are, I guess, happening. So that's kind of neat. Or you can just have it off, or always on. The LEDs, unlike some controllers, are not overly bright, and they're not super dim either. There's also a mode here. Here's the PlayStation, here's like the home button here. There's also a mode here that you can adjust the analog sensitivity, so when you move the analog sticks around. But again, this is not a very ideal controller to use if you want to use the analog sticks, because even when the analog sticks are replaced, you still are better off using a standard PlayStation 3 controller, the DualShock 3, but this D-pad is so much better. So with all that said, let's actually show you some gameplay. So I've got my PS3 on, like I said before, so now I'm just going to turn the TV on and just show you about, I don't know, a minute or so of some Super Street Fighter 4. Turn that off. Alright, here we go. Now, should be more or less good. So we're going to grab the controller here, use its D-pad. So, you know, your quarter circles, half circles, all that stuff that you do in Street Fighter or any fighting game is very easily done on this D-pad. So you can repeatedly do the same attacks very easily on this, unlike the standard PlayStation 3 controller, which I find it's far more difficult to do, you know, quarter circle movements. And that's because of the broken up nature of the Sony DualShock controller. Here it's a proper D-pad, just like the Nintendo or whatever, Sega, or, you know, any classic D-pad.
Get serious.
So anyway, guys, that'll about do it for this video. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions about this controller, you can feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And once again, it's bright and shiny, but cool controller. Or you can, if you want, turn the lights off, and you can see right through it through the TV. Ooh. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
Get serious.